What's up, PPL fans? This is Trogdor, joined by...
Hey guys, this is Baby Eric. Some of you might know me from last season of the PPL.
I sure do. We were good friends during that time, and even before then.
Yeah. Well, here we are bringing you the D1 Season 6 post-draft power rankings for the PPL.
Or as I like to call it, the Week 0, starting right after the draft.
Yeah.
So I believe, before we get into this, I believe we're just basing this off of the drafts alone.
Yes, this is 100% just off of the teams drafted, the players' abilities or whatever biases we might have towards one player, how they play versus another, don't come into play. Right now, it's just the teams alone.
Great. So you can probably already see on the screen the direction that we've chosen to go in how we believe each of these teams perform. So let's start out at number 12. And I believe we both agree on this team.
Yeah, we both have Colton's Osaka Eevees at number 12. There's not much to say about his team. It doesn't synergize well at all, pretty much. It has good speed tiers offensively. It hits the Fairy Dragon Seal Core and the Firewater Grass Core. It has removal, and it has stuff to support his round 1 pick in Blacephalon, but his ground resist is Skullbat. His flying resist is Manectric on a team with Mega Venusaur, which really needs flying resist to support it. His only Stealth Rock setter is Garchomp. And the bottom half of it's very top heavy as well. A lot of his Pokemon towards the latter half, Manectric, Scrafty, Ditto, and Regice, aren't great and don't add a ton to his team.
I'm a huge fan of Regice just because I like it as a Pokemon, but are you convinced that it can do anything at all in draft? Because honestly, even as a one of his 3 Zedmons, I believe the other one is... So we have his Z users as Regice, Ditto, and Garchomp. And like you said, the thing I'm not convinced about is I don't really know if Blacephalon is worth building a team around, and even then it doesn't have a lot for like such an offensive fast hitter, doesn't have quite, as you mentioned, the synergy that it needs to perform well.
Yeah, Blacephalon, I'm not convinced on its abilities in draft format this gen, and I definitely don't think it's a round 1 pick, even if it is. Alright, its move pool is super limited. It basically has fire and ghost coverage, and it doesn't really have anything outside of that. I think it gets Dark Pulse, but Ghost and Dark hit the same things offensively, so not really sure on... Garchomp is a good Z user, but overall, just his team lacks a lot of offense, and it also lacks the entry hazards to support his offense. His only rocker is Garchomp, which doesn't really like to run Stealth Rocks.
Not always. It can run some good sets, but you don't want it to be limited to just that one set.
Yeah.
Anyhow, moving on, I think we're also in agreement for the... number 11 in the Cleveland Bros. There are a couple things I have to say about this team. It's definitely offensive. It definitely has a lot of power behind it. But a couple things I noticed that it's severely lacking in that more hazard stack, more reliable like fat switch-ins to other things. Like if it's going to be volt turning a lot, you need some better switch-ins besides just Porygon 2 and Mega Aggron, and could appreciate more Hazosac and better removal options. I believe Superior got defogged this gen. It almost certainly did. But
yeah, Superior did get defogged.
I think that's its only remover for the team, which...
Talonflame can defog, but given that it's 4 times weak to rocks, it's not the best at it.
Not the best at it. So there are just a few things that it's really lacking, but it's so powerful. Like, you have your Hoopa Unbound, which I'm still not convinced should be allowed in draft format, but, that's just my opinion. And Manaphy, just wow. And, well, yeah.
His offense is definitely very good. He has good setup options and breakers. His team is fast. It has priority. From an offensive standpoint, it's pretty good just mon-wise, but again, he doesn't have great hazard setters. I believe his only stealth rock setter is Mega Aggron, which is really bad on such an offensive team because you really need that chip damage. And he also doesn't have a spike setter. He does have Galvantula for the webs, but those don't really help as much.
You don't really need the webs for such a fast team.
Yeah.
So I want to see it do well. I know he did very well last season, but again, this is just about the draft itself, and I'm assuming I'm going to see it rise up a lot in the future power rankings, but for the time being.
Yeah, this is just not a team I like that much. I don't think it's that great.
All right, so moving on, I think this is where we start to disagree.
This is, yes.
I have Shoddy at number 10, and you have him a lot higher, and you have Kelly at number 10, and I have his team quite a lot higher.
Let's start off with talking about Shoddy's team.
Right, okay, so just my first note is just no. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is I think his best defense on this team, like the most reliable, like the Fatmon, is Reuniclus, and I don't see a good, like, strong knockoff switch in besides Mega Lopunny on this team. I know, like, Aromatisse is a good defensive mon, but I still don't think it's the best fairy. It's good, like, round 4, like he got it. I know Steelix is fat, but it's very, like, limited in how much it can do, so honestly his best, like, dark switch-in is Megalop. And yeah, I like Reuniclus, but I don't like the team that he has around it.
I somewhat agree with some of the things you said about Ghosts and Dark types. They definitely are a threat to his team. He doesn't switch into those well. But defensively, I didn't find that many issues with his team. I feel like Seismitoad and Steelix is a great core of bulky grounds. They don't share any weaknesses, which is always something cool when something you need to have when you end up drafting 2 ground types. The round 10 Thunderous Eye is incredible, and it really helps his offense. I believe he has a great Fighting Dark Psychic core, which is it's another great core in draft. It's not as common as Fire, Water, Grass, or Fairy, Dragon, Steel, but I believe it can be just as effective, just because of the way that the types synergize in terms of resistances and checking each other's weaknesses.
I think
Aromatisse.
Sorry.
Aromatisse, I do think that it's a very fat mon, and it can definitely switch in and take a lot of knockoffs. I think he drafted it way too early. I don't think it's a good round 4, but PPL really thinks that Aromatisse, a lot of people in the PPL love Aromatisse for whatever reason. I would never take it before round 6, but Shoddy got that, and it's not great. And also, Decidueye can be a great Spidef wall, but it doesn't help him with a lot of the weaknesses he struggles with, such as Dark, Ghost, Flying, etc.
Yeah, as like a dedicated, well, I'm not sure how he's going to use it just yet, but I don't like the fact that it's a Ghostmon that does not synergize well with some of the other things there. The thing I do like a lot is Venomoth as a Z user. I think Venomoth is fantastic in draft format, and I love it as a Z user, and just I think it's going to be both great for, like, actually running good sets and sweeping things, and for, like, his dedicated memes, for his meme weeks, which that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, Venomoth is a great pickup. I think that he definitely got a lot of value out of his later picks, because his earlier draft picks weren't that great and didn't synergize super well together, so he kind of had to scramble later in the draft. For instance, he didn't pick up a Stealth Rock Setter until round 6 with Seismitoad, and even still he only has 2. But he did end up getting a couple Defoggers. He got a T-Spikes Absorber. I believe Venomoth gets Toxic Spike as well. He definitely picked up on a lot of the rules that are kind of necessary in this draft. He got Thundy Eye for offensive breaker and setup sweeper, as well as in flying resist. I think he got a lot of value out of his later picks, which is something I really like with his team. I have it in the lower half of teams. It's not one of my favorites, but I do think it is decent.
Yeah, definitely a lot of value in the later picks, but he could have used like the points to spread out over, like, you know, instead of the whatever his budget was, what was it, like 29 plus 8, 37. He could have spread that over more mons and just gotten much more synergy rather than like great value. As good as the value was, as much as great as round 10 Thunderous is.
Yeah. Anyways, I guess let's move on to let's talk about Kelly. Kelly's team.
Yeah, you
the Maryland Torterrapins. I have him at number
low.
10, and I believe you have him at number 6, which is quite a big jump.
So why is Kelly's team so low for you right there?
All right. Main thing is ground types. He doesn't have good checks to them at all. He has 2 resists in Hydreigon and Celebi, and they're both weak to 2 of the same types, being Ice and Bug. I've joked around about this a little bit, but he gets 6-0'd by SD Ninkata. It is a bit of a meme, but just typing-wise, he doesn't have great switch-ins. I guess Miltank can take some of those ground hits, but his wall core, it being Celebi, Toxapex, they're both pretty, like, they can't support each other that well, because Celebi is weak to stuff like Ghost and Dark, and if it's a special Ghost or Dark hit, Toxapex isn't taking that. So, he's definitely pretty vulnerable to things. As far as offensively, Mega Diancie Dugtrio is very good. Hydreigon is very good. Salazzle, I'm not completely sold on, especially with how ground weak he is, but I do think it can put in work. Kelly's convinced that Linoon is one of the best setup sweepers, which, I mean, it's not the case, but I'm excited to see how he can use it. Overall, I don't think the team synergizes that great. Another thing to note is his only removal is Hydreigon, which isn't great.
Yeah, that definitely makes me a sad trog.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have Diancie, which does prevent removal if he's mega'd soon enough. But yeah, honestly, like when you just have one defogger who doesn't want to be a defogger, that's gonna put you in a lot of like undesirable situations. So that's like my number one thing that I don't like about it. My favorite thing though is the combination of Toxapex and Dugtrio, because Dugtrio can just like, if a team has, you know, a dedicated check or 2 to Toxapex, because it's such a fat thing that so many people have trouble taking down, and you have Dugtrio and, you know, occasionally Magnemite, which, by the way, meme pick for Magnemite as a Z user with the magnet pole, so you've got the trapping core. Like, tell me you're not in love with that. But
it is quite cool, yeah.
It's so cool. So I just really like that he has that particular core, because I've seen it also, I've seen it before too, and it's just fantastic. But yeah, unfortunately, like you did say, like, ground weakness is something that can be seriously taken advantage of. Like, definitely, like, whenever he goes against Mamoswine, and even Piloswine, I'm gonna, you know, talk about later once we get there in the draft. Yeah, things like that will just be able to take serious advantage. But I know, like, there are better offensive checks for those situations than defensive checks, which they can work, but it's not desirable. I just think, like, the offensive synergy on this team is fantastic, and he has his trapping cores, and his Fatmons have really good, reliable recovery. So really think he's number 6 on this power ranking.
Yeah.
But you did raise some valid points. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's just talk about a team we kind of agree on. We have them I have her at number 9. You have her at number 8. Ellie's Accrington Stantler.
Right, Ellie. So I really like the team in some respects, and I dislike it for some reasons too. Like, pulling up my notes on this. The main cores that we talk about, like the Fire, Water, Grass, and the Dragon, Steel, Fairy, I thought these were just underwhelming on this team. I tend to really favor teams with very strong, like, Dragon, Steel, Fairy cores, just because that's what people tend to go for in leagues. So I know Skarmory is really fat, but it's so limited in what it can do. Like, there are so many great steals that can be offensive and defensive, and it synergizes well with Florges. But then when your dragon type is a Mega Sceptile, like, it's becomes somewhat shaky as a defensive core.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying. Victini and Mega Sceptile is a very scary offensive core and can help break for each other, but in terms of a lot of her later picks, I just don't see a lot of synergy on her draft. Like, in terms of water types, which is one of the most prevalent offensive types, she has a lot of weaknesses and only 2 resists, I believe, which is less than ideal. And I don't see that. Nothing on her team really scares me as someone having to prep for it. There's nothing that's super spooky. She has 2 mons that are like, that can do a lot of ow, and that's Victini and Mamoswine, but neither of those are very fast, and you can check them very easily. Mega Sceptile I don't see as being a huge threat this season. I don't believe in it as a Mega Pokemon. I think there's so much to check it, especially now in Gen 7. I just don't agree. I just don't like a lot of the mons on her team, pretty simply.
Yeah, Victini, like, it's definitely, like, one of the hurts the most, but I'm not convinced that the draft around it can give it proper support. Like, you have Tentacruel, Skarmory, Florges all as hazard removal, but like you said, so many of the things, like, they're like the later part of the draft, I'm just not convinced is good. As much as I want to, like, give a huge shout out to her. What is that, Tortuga?
Yeah.
Tortuga. That's I love the last round 1 point meme picks. They're great, but.
Alright, so let's move on and talk about Trev and his Houston Toxapex. I definitely had him much higher than you did. You had him at number 9. I had him at number 5.
9. Yeah, that's probably one of our biggest disparities.
Yeah.
Maybe between Trev. No, that's an even bigger disparity than we have with the Jack. So, what did you like about his team?
So, I really like how he drafted around Celesteela. I believe he set up this team for Celesteela to win very well. Celesteela often struggles against electric types and really bulky steels or grounds. And he has stuff like Mega Charizard X, the Latios, the Rotom Wash. I just love a lot of the mons on his team. He has great entry hazard setters in Empoleon, Aerodactyl, and Nidoqueen. I think he really has the synergy to help Celesteela work. He has the Volt Turn, he has the setup sweepers, he has the breakers, he has the offense, he has the pursuit trappers, he has the bulky pivots in Umbreon, Empoleon, and Whimsicott to help take hits. I really like his team.
It's definitely a good, like, take a lot of hits and hit back, but the one thing I really see lacking is immediate offense outside of Mega Charizard X. and Latios to be fair, but like if your two big offensive Pokemon are both dragon types, as much as dragon spam, if you get rid of their steals and fairies, which this team could potentially do, it's the immediate like really faster than base 110 speed, because like base 100 used to be like the mark, and now I feel like the things have power crept enough to that like base 110 is now the mark, so he doesn't have a lot of really good hitters above that. And Zardex, it's fantastic, I love it, but it needs to set up before it's a real threat. But
yeah, I definitely see what you're saying about the like wall breaker that he's kind of lacking to an extent. But with all of his Volt turn that he has on his team, and the fact that he has Umbreon that can't really do a ton to an opposing Mon, but then his second weakest Pokemon are Whimsicott and Nidoqueen, which are potent offensive threats. Especially Empoleon, it has like 100 base special attack. I can see him running that offensive several times. I think that he is going to set his team up to Volt turn around, get up hazards, get the chip needed so that Celesteela, Zardax, Latios could sweep late game.
I definitely wasn't viewing it from the same angle as you are, so I definitely see how Celesteela can be set up to win. I know it's fantastic, but one thing is, I personally hate Umbreon. It just doesn't do anything. It's just annoying. It doesn't die, but it doesn't do anything. It's just like wasted turns for your opponent to like maybe get you to rage quit. Like
I like it as a Wish Passer and a pivot. I think Baton Pass, Wish, it can foul play, so it deters setup, and a lot of the potent special attackers that set up are Psychic types, so can't really set up on those. And he has plenty of answers for Fairy types, so I think Umbreon's a pretty good Mon. I'm not a huge fan of it either. I don't think anyone really likes to face an Umbreon, but it's definitely a Pokemon that is a bulky Mon, and it can pivot around and wall some things.
And it's probably going to get pigeonholed into being a Wish Passer, because aside from like none of his like defensive, he doesn't have a lot of great recovery on this team.
He doesn't. It definitely will bring Wish. If it comes, it's going to bring Wish every time. Because that's its role. It needs to heal up stuff like the Rotom Wash, the Whimsicott, the Nidoqueen, so that those can repeatedly pivot in and take hits, get up rocks, Volt Switch out, whatever their role is. He probably won't ever Wish Pass into something like the Empoleon, because they do both share that potent fighting weakness. But Empoleon is a great defogger, and I believe his whole team in total has something like 6 defoggers, which is kind of amusing.
It certainly is.
Yeah. Anyways, let's move on to my number 8, and your number 3.
Right, I was gonna say. So we had a pretty big disparity. So let's talk about Jack. I'm all the way up to my number 3 here. So
yeah. So I'll get started and say why I don't really like his team. Okay, so he has Jirachi, Clefable, Salamence, which is a very potent Fairy Dragon Steel Core. It would be one of the top back in Gen 6. I don't think it holds up as well in Gen 7. I think Jirachi isn't quite as good as it was last gen. Same with Clefable. Salamence has obviously gotten quite a bit better. But this is it's a slow, bulky Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Jirachi, it's not quite the offensive threat you want it to be. Salamence, of course, can set up. So I don't think his Fairy Dragon Steel Core, while solid, it doesn't really carry the rest of his team. Like, I don't really see a lot of the threats later on that I would like. Mega Arrow is a threat. Lucario is a threat. But he doesn't have any real special breakers. And he doesn't have great hazard setters either. And Jirachi, Clefable are pretty much his only 2 Rockies. Mega Arrow as well. But I think he's going to be severely underwhelmed with Clefable, and I feel like Jirachi is just going to have to support his team way too much. I don't like this team that much. Also, one of the main reasons his team is so low, he left 1 point on the board and only drafted 9 Mons, foregoing the meme pick, which there's absolutely no reason to do, and that angers me.
I Okay, I'm looking at my notes, and my number one complaint is should have used remaining one for a meme. Like that's honestly one of my favorite things about the PPL is like the people with the points based system, and it allows you to have that one meme pick, which would have been great. But the cores are scary. Like the Jirachi, the Clefable, and the Salamence. Like Salamence is a Zmon. That alone should be like bump it up two more spots. Jirachi and Clefable, they're slow and bulky, but everything has the potential to be defensive and offensive. Is why I love it so much. Jirachi is a win con in any game that you bring it, as much as like Ironhead, Scarf Ironhead flinching is it's cancer, but it can win games on its own. Clefable, I disagree that it's lost favor in this gen. I think it's still one of the scariest things to go against because it can just run so many good sets, and Salamence is gotten so fantastic this gen that it's going to be doing so many good favors. I really like Mega Arrow and Lucario as potential like late game cleaners on this team, and while it is lacking breakers, it's filled with a lot of things that can do, like, what is it, slow and bulky, and it can just do a lot of damage when needed.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's a bad team by any means. My teams from 8 to 1, I all believe are good teams that can do something. I'm just not quite convinced on some of the lower ones. One of my other complaints I forgot to mention is he has no ghost resist. And having no resist to a type that offensively is very scary on its own, and you have two weaknesses in Jirachi and Delmise. Don't really like that at all, as well as dark types also being quite a big threat. He doesn't have great switches to knock off, so those are another couple things that I have problems with.
You have Lucario, which resists and can get a justified boost. That's as good of a knockoff switching as you can get. But the lack of a ghost resist, like even with your remaining one budget, you could have gotten like what, Spinda? Is that 1 point? Or
you could have gotten Spinda. You could have gotten Zwilus. You could have gotten a couple cool things. There are definitely some cool things. Forget me. I apologize about the dark thing. I definitely skipped over Lucario while looking at that. But those are my main problems with his team, if I recall correctly. Oh, also his removal. Delmise is not a good spinner. I had it last season. I tried to make it work. It really just wants to be a breaker. It's not great defensively. It wants to be a breaker almost every week. And it's not good at spinning. It's a good spin blocker. It's just not good at spinning. And Salamence doesn't really want to run defog, especially on this team. It wants to run offensive almost every week. So I feel like he's going to struggle to get removal. He doesn't have a T-Spikes absorber either. So his team while he tries to pivot around his Fire Water Grass or Fire Water Grass core, he's going to get worn down by Toxic Spikes, and all that sorts of things.
Honestly, what it comes down to is it's a team that I would personally draft myself, but I really want to see it do well. In future weeks, whether or not it does will be the determining factor, obviously, but it's just, I personally really like it a lot for reasons. But moving on, I believe we, next up, we have Polymac. You had him at 6, I'm at 7, so we're more or less in agreement with
we have him right around the same range there.
Right, so I didn't have a lot to say about it. It looks good. There's nothing that really... What do you have to say about it?
I helped Polymac draft this team to some extent. I was in his front office. I had some input in what he was taking. I convinced him to take Vikavolt, as I am one of the biggest Vikavolt enthusiasts out there. But there are several problems I do have with this team. I think it's definitely a top half. I have it at number 6. I think it's just barely top half. His flying resist is Heatran, which isn't great, especially on a team with stuff like Mega Gallade and Scolipede that really do want that flying resist. Another thing as well is that he doesn't really have a wall with recovery. All of his bulky mons, such as Heatran, Primarina, Crocodile, Dredagon, Vikavolt to an extent, none of them have recovery, which means that his team is going to get worn down very quickly if he has to pivot around.
Yeah, and you do have you have a Tornadus Darien, which is a fantastic U-turner, and even while it has Regenerator, it can get worn down quickly. But the lack of recovery in the Bulkymons is a problem for any team, to be certain.
Yeah, I think his offensive synergy is very good. Gallade, Mega Gallade's a great pick. Tornus, T, and Scolipede, they all synergize very well, with Mega Gallade destroying Seal types for Scolipede, Scolipede taking care of the fairies for Mega Gallade. I think it definitely synergizes very well. But I definitely think he's going to struggle in the fact that none of his offense isn't, aside from Mega Gallade, they're not just straight wall breakers. They need a turn to, or they need chip damage they need chip damage so that they can sweep. Mega Gallade, it has 165 attack, but it can't hold an item, so it's not quite as strong as you would otherwise think. But it does have that close combat it can spam off. But he's going to need acquire chip in this game in order to sweep with one of his mons like Tornadus T or Scolipede. And in order to do that, he's going to have to pivot a lot, which means he's going to have to take damage on all of his bulkier mons, none of which have recovery, which is the main problem I see with this team.
And besides Mega Gallade, tell me how his team is supposed to deal with Piloswine.
Something like Piloswine? Vikavolt. Vikavolt's a great Piloswine trick.
Fair. I just remember in the draft stream there, it was just, a nonstop trash show for Piloswine. I was gonna say, speaking of Piloswine, I was gonna move on to the next online. My number 5, your number 4. I believe that's Redithin?
Ethan's Tennessee Dynamos.
Yeah, so Piloswine destroys half the drafts on here, so that's it. We're done.
I know that we're making fun of Ethan a little bit for the round 6 Piloswine, and it may be a little early, but I was talking to him about it, and it's just a mon he couldn't afford to get sniped. It was essential to his plan, and there's not really any other Pokemon that do what it does. It's a bulky ground type that isn't weak to ice. It actually resists ice, which is very special and unique. It also has a base 100 attack stat, so it can threaten things. It threatens dragon types with the ice shard. So I actually agree with the Piloswine pick. I like the Piloswine. As far as his team, Tapu Koko Halucha is just so good. Especially with stuff like Mega King and Greninja.
He has a lot of seriously powerful things. Like the Koko and Halucha, of course, that really stands out. Mega Kangaskhan, like, even if I understand, like, Seismic Toss is not allowed on Mega Kangaskhan.
Yeah, Seismic Toss is the only thing that's banned, but you can run Power Up Punch, you can run Return, you can run Wish, whatever.
It's going to be fantastic, I know. And it just overall, like, there is so much power on it. There are some good defensive mons, not great, but good. And he has some good hazard setters and some decent removal on the team as well.
Yeah, his team is definitely very scary. He doesn't, again, kind of like Polymac, he doesn't have that instant wall breaker. However, he does have very fat, bulky offensive Pokemon. He has recovery. He does struggle. Something I'm noticing just now is he does struggle to break down bulky steel types. His best answer for that is something like Lucha or Rapidash. And that's kind of scary because two of his biggest offensive threats are Mega King and Necrozma.
Well,
So
Mega Kang run Power Up Punch?
it can run Power Punch and it can run EQ. But even still, I feel like something like a Bronzong would be very tough for his team to break through.
If it's his only good check for bulky steals, it's certainly going to struggle for sure.
But overall, I really like Ethan's team. I believe Tapu Koko and Halusha alone will just win him games. And he has the spike support from Gren, which is honestly one of the best things about this team. His team thrives on the fact that it has spikes. If it didn't have a great spike setter like Greninja, I'd probably put it at like number 7. But the fact that he has Tapu Koko, Halucha, Mega Kang, spikes, I think it's a great team.
All right. So before we get into our number 1 and 2s, I think we've got one more team to talk about.
Yeah, we have the Melbourne Victory Star, coached by Better Jack. Electric Storm 252.
Better Jack, yeah. So he has Tyranitar and Excadrill. So
yeah, that's
all...
definitely a good core. I think his first 4 picks are incredible. Mew, T-Tar, Excadrill, Kyurem B. All of those are first round picks.
I was going to say, absolutely. Like, Mew is the best Mon there is. Situationally, I'm going to talk more about Mew later, but Tyranitar and Excadrill are certainly good picks together. Like, it's a fantastic sand core. Like, I love Tyranitar. It's one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most versatile Mons there is. Excadrill just wins even outside of the sand. It's a fantastic Mon, even without the sand support. Kyurem B as a Z user, just watch out. Wasn't so convinced about the defensive Mons on this team, but I know things like Mew, Tyranitar, even Kyurem can be defensive. Like, they have that option, but there's no good, like, dedicated wall on this team. So one thing I don't like about...
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed about his team is after the 4th pick, the quality of Pokemon really just starts to drop off. Like, Rabombi can definitely do some cool things. It can set webs, it can quiver dance. I think it's a cool value pick. But then he goes in rounds 7 and 8, and he drafts Double Ghost and Gourgeist and Chandelure. And I don't really see how that benefits his team too well. His team is kind of weak to... Dark/Ghost spam as it is. He does have the T-Tar, but if that were to drop somehow, then he doesn't really have a switch in. So I'm not really sold on how Double Ghost helps his team.
Yeah, with Mew there, you absolutely need a strong knockoff switch in, which I see his Mew running the Dark Resist Berry.
Colbur, yeah. Colbur. It's going to run Colbur a lot, but...
Probably every other week.
Yeah.
Which this isn't a team that supports Mew very well. It's just a team that happens to get supported by Mew. So it's going to be not running its optimal set every week, which it's just, your standard Mew syndrome where it wants to run a better set, but it just can't for what the team needs filled in any given week.
Yeah. I think it's... I have it at number 3. I think it's definitely a great team, and I think the first 4 alone, like, you don't really need much more than that. And he definitely has some value in the later picks with Rabombi and Quillfish, and I know Swellow's gotten a lot better this gen, and Flying Spam is really good against a lot of the other teams that have been drafted. But, like, Gourgeist, Chandelure, Luxray, I'm not convinced that those Pokemon at all can do anything. Yeah, I think that the top 4 alone will win his game, but he doesn't really have much in the later half.
If it had been an 8-mon draft, and the later 4 were just a really great, like, bulky synergy that has recovery and hazards, it would have been fantastic. But it just seems like the later rounds are just a little bit awkward on it. But it's still, like, you had it really high and I had it high too, so it's still great.
Yeah. Alright, now let's get to number 1 and 2, which we do have flipped, but for me at least, they're kind of they're both so much. The drop off between number 2 and number 3 for me is incredible, and number 1 and 2 are very close.
Yeah, I had them almost as equal. It was just, almost like flipping a coin, just who, or rather which team looks like it's actually going to consistently win a lot, which...
Yeah.
I had
So, do you
Kyle
want to
at
start
number
with
one.
Kyle?
Yeah,
Let's start with Kyle.
Let's start with Kyle. My biggest complaint is really trivial, in that he has 2 things on his team that could be named Trogdor for his nicknames, but he didn't choose that, so,
Oh, poor Trog.
Yeah, like Zygarde, the S is for snake, and Gyarados, like, come on, but But that being my biggest complaint, like, Zygarde, that's, like, wow, fantastic. Like, Alola Ninetales with the, what do you call it, Aurora Veil support is just amazing. As much as Hail might deter certain things, like, Aurora Veil is just so amazing. He has a lot of really good bulky mons, a lot of really fat offensive mons. How do you feel about there being 2 weather setters?
I don't see that as a problem, the 2 weather setters, just because they don't conflict with each other at all. All that Sand does is it gives T-Star the Spidef boost, and it's not like his team is a Sand team, and it's not like his team is a Hail team. Though the weather is just specific for those mons, so I don't see it conflicting really at all. And on both ends, it gets that chip against his team, the enemy team, which is something that's helpful. My problems and reservations with his team, and why I put it at number 2, is 2 things. One, the speed. His fastest mon is Alolan Ninetales, which doesn't even break 110, which is a bit of a problem, in my opinion. I think that you definitely need a couple of faster mons. I think you need a Pokemon at least 115 or higher to be a super big threat. I think that Kyle has enough speedy setup. He has like 3 Dragon Dancers to help get speed, and he has a great Scarfer in Infernape and great Scarfers in Infernape and Zapdos that can help mitigate that speed. But that is an issue and a reservation, and why I couldn't put it at number 1. Another thing is he doesn't really have a super strong wall breaker. I know Kyle mentioned this in his draft analysis, but his strongest Pokemon is Mega T-Tar, and that can't hold a boosting item, which kind of mitigates his power. Of course, Banded Zygarde Thousand Arrows is super strong and can wall break, but he really needs to set up with a lot of his Pokemon before he can do that heavy damage.
To be fair, true. But then again, his setup sweepers are extremely scary setup sweepers, and that's... Well, I personally, again, this is just my personal bias, what I like in drafts, and I think setup sweepers are fantastic, especially with the amount of support that he has with Aurora Veil, with some good bulky mons, with some really great hazard setters and things that can you turn into your... Well, no, I think it's only Volt Turners or Zapdos and Infernape, but they're still great support for that.
Yeah. Also, just his team is very good. It's one of the top 2. I think he got great value in Audino, Quag, and Trevenant. I think those are all great picks. And just his offense it's scary, man. It's scary. His only defogger is Zapdos, which might be a bit of an issue, but he kind of forces his opponent to defog because he does have the Aurora Veil, so I don't see that being too much of an issue. But yeah, that's Kyle. Do you want to move on to Mono?
The last guy we gotta go over, Mono and his Tampa Bay Luxrays. Wow, fantastic. My number 2, your Monotui, my number 2, your number 1. Yeah, wow, fantastic, amazing. I just have to say, like, find your Sunflora check.
Exactly. And if that's not named Rizzy Pal, I'm gonna come for you. I'm gonna come for you, Monotui. But Landorus T is the scariest offensive mon in draft format right now. It's also the only Pokemon, one of 3 Pokemon that's 19 points. It's accompanied by Mew and Mega Latios. Landorus T is just so scary to prep for. And he also has another scary Pokemon with Flying Stab and Mega Pinsir, and they can kind of help break for each other, which is just super scary. He has great defoggers in Tapu Fini and Landorus T that can help defog. He has tons of hazard setters in Komodo, Lando T, Rhyperior, Mesprit. He has Baton Pass in Pyukumuku, which I actually think Pyukumuku adds so much to his team because of its unaware. You can't really counter set up against him because he does have that Pyukumuku that can pivot out with Baton Pass, and it can do something like Curse Pass with the pass into something with the White Herb. He has great pivots and bulky offense in Tapu Fini, Komodo, Magnezone, Mesprit, Rhyperior. Just, this team's scary, man.
It has everything it needs, and it might be a throwback to Gen 6 with the dual flying spam, bird spam. I know Landorus isn't like your traditional bird spam like Brave Bird everything, but with the Z Fly, like it's not only like a scary like bird spam, but it's a scary bird spam that can beat bird spam checks easily.
Yeah.
So
also, I think that Gengar adds a lot to his team because, as we said, a lot of these earlier, many of these teams don't have great ghost resists, and a lot of their Pokemon that could possibly check a Landorus or a Mega Pinsir, such as maybe a Jirachi or a Mew, they just get blown back by something like Gengar. I definitely think that Monotui has one of the best teams, and the main thing that put him over the edge for Kyle is the speed tiers, the super scary Pursuit Trapper and Sneasel, and the immediate power that comes with Mega Pinsir and Lando T.
Right, this team has everything that all the tools for success that anyone would ever need.
Yeah.
So I hope to see it do well.
Yeah. So I think that's it for the Week 0 D1 Power Rankings.
Yeah, we've been talking about some things for quite a while now. Hope people didn't get bored to death, but I'm
yeah, before this recording, we said we were going to try to keep it for 30 minutes, and we've been recording for about an hour. So
yeah, close to, but I'm gonna gonna see how much
we can cut down.
If I can cut it down to like 30 minutes, but anyway. Regardless, I hope everyone enjoyed. I hope you are all sub to your favorite PPL coaches.
And even your least favorite, just sub to them all.
Just sub to them all. Check out the PPL channel for more amazing content like this. And we forgot D2 existed for a bit, but their power rankings will be up there too. We've also got our fantastic match of the week feature going on, so there's a lot of fantastic content coming up for the PPL.
Be sure to stay tuned for the Week 1 matches of PPL D1 Season 6 drop on coaches' respective channels tomorrow. Also, be sure to leave your own post-draft power rankings in the comments below. If you disagree with something you said, call us idiots, say, Eric, Trog, you don't know what you're talking about. Just call us out. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and just happy that someone that's not a coach is actually watching. So,
all right. So yeah, sub to all your channels, toss a like on this video, and we'll see you next week with our Week 1 power rankings.
Peace.